So you can go from the light. I have the green light. All right, so let's get this dash cam in. But before we get too far into this install, just a little bit of a disclaimer. So if you haven't noticed, this is actually the first sponsored video on this channel, but that doesn't mean that the rules for reviewing products or approaching products has changed or is any different than any other video that I've done before. At the end of the day, my goal is to always be transparent with you guys, and that's if I have a good experience, a bad experience, or any type of experience with the product, the goal is to help you guys make an informed decision to figure out if that's a product you want on your car, not to just, you know, put something on screen and sell it to you. FitcamX, they provided this camera to me free of charge, but no money changed hands, and they do not get editorial privileges over this video. So they are seeing this video for the first time just like, well, you are. But with all that said, let's work on getting this dash cam in here because tomorrow we're actually going on a road trip. My wife has a job in Indiana, and so we're actually gonna be road tripping this car. And so I thought that was kind of like the perfect test for this dash cam. You guys will be able to see the footage that it captures, not just, you know, me driving around my neighborhood, but at night, in the morning, and all these different environments. And I also will have like a little bit of a longer term testing period with the dash cam to be able to understand how it works and have a final verdict on if I would buy another one. And so the camera that they sent me out today is one of their universal units. This camera almost looks like it was designed to be in this car. Now, when you go to order this camera, there's all types of different options. The camera that they sent me out is a 4K camera with both the forward and rear camera, and it has the integrated surround or OEM style trim around the mirror stock. The reverse camera is actually wired into the body of the camera. So if you want to have the reverse option, you have to select the camera with the options that you want at the time of purchase. All right, so the next step is basically we have to get the wiring in there. Basically, we have the camera up there. You guys can barely see it back there. So like I said, it really just blends in behind the mirror. And thanks to these like vertical, like plastic strake type things, like you can expand and pull them back. It pretty much conceals the wiring so you don't see it. I have the wiring coming out in this top panel back where like the lights and whatnot are. And so now what I basically need to do is we need to feed a wire from the fuse box, which is in here, up through this A pillar here and across, and then get everything plugged in. All right, so we're coming along pretty good. So this is the wiring from the dash cam itself. This is the wiring from the fuse box. Basically, we just ran it along this trim here. So we were just able to lean it down, run it through here. And then the fuse box lives in this little cubby that my wife puts mints and all types of random stuff in. So as you can see, this is the inconvenient place where the fuse box lives. So the model that I chose is quote unquote hardwired, or it's a add a fuse type system. And the way this dash cam works is there's actually two add a fuse systems. So one of them has power all the time, and then the other one is keyed, or basically only runs when the ignition is on. So I got a quick look through the manual and see which of these fuses are keyed and which of them are just hot all the time. And then we'll be able to have our dash cam power up for the first time. The other option in this situation is if you don't want to use the add a fuse type thing, they do sell a version of this that actually just gets power straight from the OBD2 port. I use the OBD2 port for diagnostics and for tuning and whatnot. So I would prefer to have that accessible without having to plug it and unplug it all the time. All right, so we got pretty much everything, the fuse box done. You also have to wire a ground. So there is a bolt here that holds the dashboard on, and it's directly connected to exposed metal. So just make sure that wherever you put your ground, it's not on a painted piece of metal. It needs to be on an exposed piece of metal. And then here's our two add-a fuses. I think I found two appropriate add-a fuses. One of them is switched and one of them is hot all the time. All right, so we're gonna turn the key for the first time and see what happens. But overall, I think I'm pretty much done for today. We got it installed. That was, like I said, that was a breeze. Have driven around. Like I said, I'm just mostly looking to see over the next week how this camera does in a variety of different lighting situations. And then also on top of that, the thing that I'm looking out for is to see if I've introduced some type of parasitic drain to the electrical system in this car. All right, so final verdicts on the dash cam. So overall, just straight out the gate, I would recommend this dash cam. I actually really like it, and I probably will buy another one or a few for some of my other project cars I got around here. When it comes to the installation of this camera, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. This is a 10 out of 10. This camera looks OEM plus. Even if your car didn't come with a dash cam, like from the factory, this camera just blends in. It's amazing that they were able to come up with a design like this. A big advantage when it comes to installation of this camera is that you don't have to cut any wires. I think that's a big thing for somebody who's not comfortable doing electrical stuff on cars. So being able to install this camera without cutting a single wire is great for somebody who's a beginner. I can't really think of a way that this camera installation could have been any easier. Like I said, they just completely knocked it out of the park when it comes to installing this dash cam. There's just nothing else that I've seen on the market come close to it. Now, when it comes to the camera features itself, I think this camera is pretty well equipped, but there are a few issues here or there. But overall, let's talk about the things I like about this camera first. This camera has what's called park mode. So basically, anytime the camera hears noise or the G sensor feels the car move, it starts recording for about a minute and then it powers back off. I think that's great because I've had people hit my car while it's parked, and it would have been great to have like dash cam footage to be able to track that down. Now, when you open the app, there are also some additional features in the app. Even if you're not going to use the app a whole lot, I do recommend opening it at least once. There are some pretty useful features in there. One of them is the ability to be able to lock the card or basically lock the dash cam once it detects an impact. That makes things a little bit easier just in case like your car gets, I don't know, totaled or something, then the loop recorder doesn't like continue to record and basically overwrite the accident or whatever. And then since we're on the subject of recording, this camera has what's called a seamless loop recorder. So basically it doesn't matter what size SD card you have. So after it fills up the SD card, then it just goes and finds the oldest file and it overwrites it. So basically you have infinite recording. Now, if you want a little bit more of a frame buffer before it starts to like re-record over older footage, you can always put a bigger SD card in it. This thing supports a 256 gig SD card. I have a link for that down in the description, so check out the description. And then once you put in the bigger SD card, basically that allows you to carry around more files with you before they start to get overwritten. Something of note with this dash cam unit, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the rear camera. When you go to order this camera, you have to select if you want a rear camera at the time of order. You cannot add a rear camera to a front camera only dash cam. It is wired into the base of the camera, so if you select one that doesn't have a rear camera option, you won't be able to upgrade it in the future. I think that's a great opportunity for the manufacturer in the future to possibly revise this thing and make it so that every camera can have the rear camera added on, because then that way customers can purchase it, and then in the future they could just upgrade and add the rear camera. The other thing about the rear camera that I think is important to know is that this camera is not weatherproof. This camera has to go inside of your car. Now, where that became a problem with my Beetle is because it's a convertible and it has a folding top. There was really nowhere in here to mount that camera where I wouldn't worry about it getting caught up in the mechanism to fold the roof back. Now, I've seen some people say that they've mounted it on their windshield and then just pointed it backwards, and then that's how they record out their back window. The rear window in this Beetle is absolutely tiny. So if I did mount it on the windshield, you still wouldn't be able to see out the back window. So just keep that in mind, is that the rear camera goes inside your car, and if there's not a good place to mount it inside your car, you may have a problem and you may actually just want to forego that rear camera. And another area or opportunity for improvement with this camera is this camera does not have GPS. It would be nice to have some type of GPS coordinates down at the bottom of the screen. I do like how the playback footage has a watermark where it shows the time and it also shows, well, the brand of camera. But it would also be nice if this had a GPS module and then it could show the coordinates, because if you were to get into a car crash and you needed to show this to your insurance or show it to the police, it would be nice to literally have GPS coordinates on the footage. And then that way, when you turn over the footage, they can see that, hey, at this exact coordinate, a semi-truck ran into my Beetle or something crazy like that. In terms of ease of use, once you got this camera installed and you have all the app settings the way that you want it, this camera is a dream to use. You don't have to worry about turning it on, clicking a record button. Just as soon as you turn the key, it's automatically recording. And when you turn the car off, it automatically stops. When it's in park mode, it just turns on for literally 1 minute and then it turns back off. Now, when it comes to getting those video files off of the dash cam, there are a few little issues here and there. The camera itself uses Wi-Fi Direct. I'm not the biggest fan of Wi-Fi Direct, but it's not particularly a problem with this individual dash cam. If you don't know what Wi-Fi Direct is, basically the camera makes its own little hotspot and then your phone connects to it. It's the same way that the GoPro gets footage off of the GoPro onto your phone. My only problem with that is that I have an Android phone, and Android phones tend to not like Wi-Fi sources that don't have connection to the internet. So what will happen is you will connect your phone to it and then your phone will say there's no internet here, and then it will immediately disconnect. So just be aware of that. If it feels like you can't get connected to the camera, it's probably a setting with your phone and your phone just disliking the fact that there's no internet source on this Wi-Fi hotspot. And then once you have the file, just be aware that this camera makes the file as a .ts file. Now, what you probably are used to dealing with is a .mp4 or a .mov. Now, I haven't reached out to FitcamX to confirm this, but if I had to guess, they went with a .ts file to get around some .mp4 type shenanigans. For those of you who aren't technically inclined, when you make a .mp4 file, it has to do a final checksum once the file is done being created or rendered, and there's an amount of processing that has to happen. Otherwise, that file will be corrupted. So that's why if you have a GoPro, whenever the battery dies, it processes and then it shuts down, or when it overheats, it processes and then it shuts down. It doesn't just immediately turn off because it would corrupt that file. The same thing would happen to the files on your dash cam. Once you're wherever you're trying to go and you turn the car off, it would corrupt that last file because the power was just pulled. That's not really a problem with the .ts file. Now, where the problem with that comes is if you just pull this file and try to play it on your computer, it probably just won't play in the Windows Media Player. And so that may be a bit of an annoyance. It's not really FitcamX's fault. It's the people who created H.265. Possibly in the future, I don't know how technically doable this would be for them, but it would be nice if they could encode these files in AV1, because there is a free AV1 plugin for pretty much every device out there. And that will make things a little less complicated in terms of being able to play these files. Now, when you're watching back your video files, I think they actually look pretty decent. The front camera is 4K, like I mentioned before. Now, a lot of people will be like, what do I need 4K for on my dash cam? I'm not out here making a YouTube video. Now, why 4K is important on a dash cam is, let's say somebody hits you and tries to drive off. On your video file, what you're going to want to do is be able to zoom in on that person's car and potentially be able to read a license plate. There is more data in a 4K video file, so you can zoom in and still have fairly legible text. And that's something that you just would not be able to do with a camera that is 1080p. If you tried to do it with a 1080p camera, it would just get super blurry. Now, when it comes to other visual quality things, I think this camera actually produces a very good image. Now, you probably have seen like reflections on some of these images, and that mostly comes from the fact that my wife likes to have a little museum on her dashboard, even though I tell her not to, but whatever. But during the day, this camera produces a very nice image. It's 4K, 30 frames per second, and HDR. As things get darker, this camera does degrade in image quality, but that's fairly normal for pretty much any camera. This camera is massively helped out by the fact that your headlights are illuminating the road. And honestly, while this footage is grainy, it still is usable. If something were to happen at night, I do feel like this camera would be able to provide enough evidence to get you out of whatever situation you're in. And then finally, the value proposition of this dash cam. If you are in the market for a dash cam, I highly recommend this one. I'm going to be honest, it's not the cheapest dash cam out there, but this is very much a you get what you pay for type of situation. Not only does this dash cam produce a good image with its 4K sensor, it looks OEM. And I think that's a big deal for car enthusiasts. Anytime we're installing something on our cars, we want it to look OEM, or we often say OEM plus, and this camera has it. This camera absolutely nails the OEM plus aesthetic. And so, like I said earlier, I'm probably going to buy another one of these cameras for my other cars. And if you are interested in buying one of these cameras, check out the description. As always, down below, I have links to all the products that were in this video, and specifically for this camera and actually anything on FitcamX's website. The link that I have in the description will not only bring you to the camera, but it will give you a discount as well. But overall, I think that's pretty much all that I have to say. So if you like this video, do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.